these ideas that are invented by humans continue to have and have for a long time had violent impact on people's lives. And dealing with them doesn't mean pointing out the ways in which they're made up and expecting people to forget it, but pointing out the ways in which they're made up and then also recognizing the way that they yet still have deep-seated impacts on our ability to be kind to each other and to give everyone the dignified experience and existence that they live, which they're not getting.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone should have a dignified life. Most people aren't guaranteed that, and that's wrong. And there are all sorts of reasons why that happens. And the demons that we carry because of past trauma, because of fear, because of a scarcity mindset, because of oppression, such as racism or gender injustice or ableism or whatever it is that you want to call it, whatever your views are on economic distribution, you got to deal with those demons. You don't deal with them by saying they don't matter. So like my relationship with blackness is my relationship with blackness, and I can ignore it, I can pretend, or I can just excavate it and see like how can it adorn my existence in a way that sometimes is heavy, sometimes is light, but that I'm not afraid of.
Yo, you made it. My name is Omar and I'm honored to welcome you to the Gumcast, where we have deep conversations about the human spirit and what keeps us going despite the shittiness of it all. Our goal is to encourage you to feel seen, heard, and understood. So tune in for real and raw conversations and become part of them on findgumption.com. Hey, this is Omar Shaker. Welcome to episode number 15 of the Gumcast, where we try to untangle the topic of race through our own experiences. And this one is with my very good friend Hatim El Tayeb, who I grew up with in Egypt. We went to the same middle school and high school together. And since then, he has moved to Harvard, where he studied his undergraduate degree. And then he moved to South Africa, becoming first a teacher at the African Leadership Academy, and then the youngest ever dean of the school. Hatim is originally Sudanese, and in this episode, we're going to get into his experiences living and growing up in different countries, including Egypt, and we're going to probe and try to own to some of our own biases throughout. I hope episode gives you some new tools to talk about tough things such as race and identity in a new way that does not necessarily push you towards guilt or shame, which are sometimes propagated by both sides of the political spectrum when we come to talk about this topic, and I don't think that is ever productive. Here's another Vulnerable Gumcast conversation with my very good friend Hatim El Tayeb, who also since then has been promoted from Dean to CEO. So there's a lot that we will laugh about and a lot that we will cry about. And at the end, I hope that you find this as cathartic to listen to as it was for us to record. Yo, Dean El Tayeb.
Yo, what's up, Shaker?
Thanks for making it.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here, and I'm glad we're finally doing this.
Yes, it's been a long time coming.
Indeed.
Been very excited to have this conversation with you because you're one of the most eloquent people I know. You're one of my oldest friends.
I look forward to disappointing you.
Thank you, as always. But also, it's pretty special that we are doing this in Lamu.
Yeah, in a bright afternoon of a bright new year.
Indeed. And I've been here for a month now, researching the book. And it's nice to be able to explore this town with such an old friend. And it's also particularly interesting for us to be recording this episode about identity, because I've been thinking a lot about identity of my characters, but also of myself. And I've known you since we were little kids. Growing up, you were the only Black person that I knew. There's a lot to explore and unpack about our own experiences. My own identity has been very much all over the place since I came to this island, because people here see me as a white European, and I am lighter skinned, but I'm also very brown when I'm in America because I'm an Arab. And especially in this island, it's an island where the Arabs came first and then saw themselves superior over Africans. And so if you're a Muslim, you're like a higher breed here. And it's been really confusing for me.
Yeah, I think identity has a way of doing that.
Yeah. So why don't we start off with a story that can help the audience connect with your background and your relationship to this topic.
Cool. Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts and we'll see where the different threads end up taking us. Yeah, I'll begin by saying I'm grateful for the chance to have this conversation because it's not a topic we had the kind of language to explore in your kids, even though we had having all these formative experiences everyone has when they're that age. Also, obvious caveats, like everything I can talk about is just personal experience, just like you. Can't behave as an ambassador for Sudanese people or people who experience being a minority at one point or another. My family's from Sudan. I was born in Kuwait. I lived in Oman for a long time, and I lived in Egypt for probably the most important part of my childhood, which is where we know each other from. Sudan has a really fucked up history with race because it's just like most African countries or most post-colonial countries is largely an invented border. But within that invented border, you've got a whole lot of diversity. But one big kind of dividing line is between North and South, or was before the South became independent. And in the North, you have more Arabized people, like my family. And in the South, you have people who are less Arabized. Pretty much anyone who met a Sudanese person, whether they're North or South, would be like, yeah, these are all black people. But within Sudan, people definitely talk about gradations of color as good or bad things. And I think probably my first knowledge of people talking about race as an important element of identity was in the house. My parents were bad people, but would make passing remarks when they're trying to describe someone, trying to remember someone. They would use words like Ahmed or Asfar, or as are Arabic words for red, yellow, blue to describe different types of skin tone.
Who are blue people?
Blue is very dark.
Blue's very dark.
Blue's very dark.
Wow.
And like yellow and red are lighter. Green is also one of the colors that's mentioned.
Fascinating.
But sometimes you would hear someone from North Sudan describing either someone they really don't like or specifically being denigrating towards someone from the South, and they would say Abd. And they were referring to someone who's very black, so black that they would be a slave. And people in North Sudan traded in slavery. So from a young age, I don't have very specific conscious memories, but I know I would have been exposed to this idea of, oh, interesting, like race has these gradations or blackness has these gradations. And at least for some people, it seems like the darker the gradation, there's some association with inferiority. But this was all what I was experiencing about that in the household. And maybe when we met family members, I didn't travel to Sudan until I was like 12 or 13. I was living outside of Sudan. And pretty much I was always the darkest skinned person in the classroom that I was in. So at school, like the other really important place where I was being socialized, whether in Oman, like in Muscat, I probably had a couple of classmates who were either Sudanese or from other African countries. But in Egypt, when we were classmates for almost the whole time, except for briefly in grade 8, I was the only dark-skinned person by Egyptian standards. Right.
And before we get into that phase, I wanted to ask you about growing up in Oman.
Yeah.
When your parents mentioned all these different colors of people, how did you react to them back then? Like just being a little kid, what was your take on all these colors?
Yeah, I remember definitely having a thought like, blue people? There's blue people?
Same here.
I've definitely never seen a blue person.
It's like,
exactly, yeah. Robin Williams is Blue Man Group. Much later in life, you can see them. You're like, oh, that's who they were talking about.
That Wim Hof guy, I'm sure. It's
These people are just really sad all the time. No, I think you pick up you learn language by trial and error. You try it out, you try and describe someone and get made fun of, and they tell you more. And then you start to kind of understand. But it didn't stick because even right now, I can't tell you exactly the difference between red, yellow, and green.
Yeah. Me neither. I can't even imagine a green person. I want to get back to this idea of is color a hallucination? Really? Especially since, mentioned all these psychedelic colors that can be involved, that I'm sure a lot of listeners haven't also imagined before.
Yeah. These received identities and like to intellectualize what's grounded in reality and what's a human invention.
Mm.
But it's important not to dismiss the real force that they have in people's lives. And I'm not the person to talk about this, but it's a short step that someone could go from saying race is an invention to I don't see race, or to recently happened to a South African woman who'd been invited to talk on this guy's podcast, this white guy's podcast. He said to her, nobody cares about race, so she stopped talking about race. And it's these ideas that are invented by humans continue to have and have for a long time had violent impact on people's lives. And dealing with them doesn't mean pointing out the ways in which they're made up and expecting people to forget it, but pointing out the ways in which they're made up, and then also recognizing the way that they yet still have deep-seated impacts on our ability to be kind to each other and to give everyone the dignified experience and existence that they live, which they're not getting.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone should have a dignified life. Most people aren't guaranteed that, and that's wrong. And there are all sorts of reasons why that happens. And the demons that we carry because of past trauma, because of fear, because of a scarcity mindset, because of oppression, such as racism or gender injustice or ableism or whatever it is that you want to call it, whatever your views are on economic distribution, you got to deal with those demons. You don't deal with them by saying they don't matter.
I think belonging is the bigger theme here. And belonging is essentially, I think, where it hurts at the end of the day. And we were unpacking some things from our childhood about that. So let's fast forward a little bit into your story, our story, because that's where we meet, right? You're in Egypt now, and you just joined the middle school. It was
grade
six. Yeah, same. So that's where we met. But tell me more about the first few years and how it felt to be essentially now an expat in Egypt.
Yeah. So first of all, I would say being in Egypt generally as a Sudanese person, you're a more familiar type of alien, if that makes sense. Like in Oman, there was Sudanese people, but not a ton, and it wasn't a long-term relationship. But in Egypt and Sudan, that relationship is ancient.
Oh.
And every Egyptian that you talk to will say, I will, blah, blah, blah. And you have to parse what they mean by that. But I think to me, it's genuinely like familiarity and friendliness, but also a little bit of, we used to rule you guys. Which is okay, cool. I'm glad that you have this grasp of basic history. Plus, Cairo is a city. And Oman, like I was in Muscat, it's a tiny, tiny place. So I spent more time walking around in Cairo and was more subject to just random people. Or there was that Native that had that song, Chocolata. And so that song was a big part of grade 6 and 7. Literally random people in the street just being like, Chocolata, which like is both like hilarious and really irritating. Which I guess is my experience of being Sudanese in Egypt.
That's really interesting, yeah. It both puts you in a box, which is irritating, but it's literally a sweet thing.
Yeah,
okay,
like
I'm calling you like a chocolate.
It could it could be a lot worse, right? There's a lot of things that get yelled at Black people in major cities around the world. They're a lot worse. And it was never followed with a threat of violence or anything. It was just, I think the fact that you're Black is funny. I'm going to point that out, and we can speak the same language, and we have shared culture, and then every third person is also the kindest people I know are Sudanese, or my cousin went to Sudan and married a Sudanese woman or whatever. So it didn't feel like I imagined what it would be like for people who were Black in Europe or people who were Black in Lebanon, even. I didn't go that far away. And I imagine that some of what gets hurled is worse. But I imagine that what happens for South Sudanese people in Egypt, of which there are a lot more, and who are primarily there as refugees, and are more recent arrivals than North Sudanese people, and are visibly differentiable from North Sudanese people, it's probably a lot worse. My first couple of years in school in Egypt wasn't my blackness as much as I couldn't speak Egyptian Arabic as well as someone who's been in Egypt their whole life, obviously. I was more comfortable speaking English because the friendships I had in the previous school, I was doing it in English. And so I ended up befriending more Americanized kids, including primarily Egyptians who'd been living in America. And as an example of that, we became friends on the first day of grade 6 because we were like, the other students in the class were like, why the hell are you guys talking English? We were like, because that's what we taught. And then you ended up in this weird ostracized group of kids, misfits from all the different grades who everyone thought were pretending to be cool by speaking English, when really it was like, this is what we know how to speak.
I feel that even in recording this podcast. I feel that, and it's interesting, I relate to that so much because I had come from Kuwait, from an American school, and the kids would make fun of me for speaking again in all English all the time.
That was literally what you would say, all English all the time.
Yeah, thank you, Melody, for that. And I think I started wanting to change that so much, popping back into my Egyptianness, and it started like a whole domino effect of trying to figure out, okay, what is my identity really? Because then at some point I'm neither speaking Arabic nor English.
I'm going to express myself in a hodgepodge of language.
Yeah.
And if I can find people who that means something to, then the communication I have with them, just like the communication we can have with the people we grew up with, is just more real and honest than most other communication we have access to.
Absolutely. I feel most authentic in my expression when I'm speaking that hodgepodge, the mix between Arabic and English.
Yeah.
Nice balance.
Yeah.
So even though I'm recording this podcast in English and I want it to be accessible to a wider audience, that's why I made that conscious decision. But I imagine I would be more comfortable here لو أقدر أتكلم بالعربي كمان. Back to that idea of people are ostracizing you about not just how you look, but how you're talking. And maybe the ideas you have that they can't relate to. What was that feeling like?
Yeah.
How did you maneuver that?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to this theme of privileged disadvantage. I don't know, a privileged minority is like, I'll get teased for sitting with the Americanized kids or speaking in an Americanized way or reading fantasy books before Harry Potter came out and made fantasy cool. But at the same time, the thing I'm being teased for, which is reading and liking, like we're in an English medium school and all the subjects were in English and there was English class and whatever, you're like doing really well in class. And people are like, who is this guy? Why is he getting these grades?
Yeah.
Getting praise from teachers or other things that, like if the whole thing was bad, right? If I was being made fun of for this thing and it was costing me, I was at the bottom of the class, I think I would have had a negative, a much more different experience. But here I could be like, yeah, okay, make fun of me, but this is clearly going to be useful.
Yeah.
Whatever. Like, I don't need that praise from you. I'm getting it from another system of power, which is a lucky place to be in. That didn't necessarily have to be the case. I could have been in a different, if the situation was reversed and I spoke Arabic really well and I was at English medium school, which is the experience of a lot of kids who immigrate to Western countries, I think it would have been pretty bad. So I guess it was fine. There's the awkward, shitty stuff that comes with being a teenager, but I don't feel traumatized by it, and that's the same way that I feel about my racial experience of being Sudanese or Black in that classroom.
So that brings us to the time where we actually started being friends and hanging out, and I remember having this perception of you as being some kind of whiz kid. You're the kid that had the highest composition scores for sure. I remember that. Later on, the highest English SET scores. And then being one of the very few people in our class that got into an Ivy League school at Harvard. But you were always someone with some magical powers, right? Like you knew so much. It's interesting, like reflecting on that and how that gave you maybe some resilience towards the lack of belonging, because you knew that you were excelling one way or another. But at the same time, I think we usually perceived you as having a very thick skin because of these accomplishments that you had, which we may have been envious of. But ultimately, we reached a point where a bunch of us misfits have been hanging out for a very long time with
with very little outside world communication because we realized, okay, we belong to each other one way or another. When I reflect back on during that time going into high school, there was a lot of jokes that we did just about the fact that you were black, which then the interesting conversation is, what was the intention there? What were we doing exactly? Was this racist? What is racism ultimately? Because we were all bullying each other essentially, and taking out our confusion with the testosterone that's slipping up. We were mostly boys too. It's not like that in-group was very mixed. And so there was a lot of trying to maneuver our anger, collective anger about how things are, and whether that was school or country, or trying to get ourselves out of that box. So there was that channeling of exploration of who we are. And part of that included us being so comfortable with each other that we're saying things that maybe now we would think very insensitive or hurtful, needlessly hurtful. And especially if we talk to other friends, they may be really appalled about what we'd be calling each other then. So I feel part of me right now wants to really own up to that experience. And say a lot of the things that I have said to you were insensitive. The intention was never to hurt you. When I think about it, that is what I was doing. So I'm curious to know, first, how was it for you, and how was it different from what you were just describing as coming in as an expat?
Yeah, it's really interesting to be able to talk about this stuff. So thanks for creating space. I think ninth graders everywhere in the world, and probably people of that age or in that socialization status throughout human history, are assholes.
Ninth grade is the worst.
There's so much chemically happening in your brain, and there's all this wrestling for social status, and you can either remove yourself from it or participate in it, and sometimes your fortunes are up and sometimes your fortunes are down. You could be the most popular kid, and then someone puts chocolate on the seat of your pants and it looks like you shit yourself and you're done. You've lost it. And it's nice to be able to go back and think about it and analyze it, but I don't know how much guilt we should carry about it, or shame. I don't know. Before we talk about the race thing, we were all constantly throwing around homophobic slurs. Like, it's the standard way to insult someone is to call them gay.
Yes.
And that's for the most minor interaction. Someone accidentally steps on your foot or something. Or for the worst possible thing, like if someone stabbed you with a knife, which never happened, but if someone did that, would be the first thing that you respond. That was just the basic bullet. I can't imagine what it would have been like to be not straight in our school or in any part of that culture, which is the pervasive culture and continues to be the pervasive culture, presumably.
I would imagine that to be an even more terrifying ninth grade. And that's really hard to imagine.
Later in life, I remember the interactions where I was like, oh, this is actually not cool. I remember the times I said things and people were like, what the hell are you saying? And then be like, oh, yeah, that is appropriate for you to react to me that way, but it took some time to unlearn. So anyway, I think the racial stuff, it's fascinating to look back and think about, because I see how, just like you were describing, people who weren't there with us react to when they hear nicknames that I had or jokes that people would pull. Like we were saying the other day, school ended at 4 p.m. It was always daylight at school. And still, though, we would be in the class and the power would go out rarely. This light would be slightly dimmer, and then someone would be like, hey, Hatim, smile so we can see you, right? I don't know. It's an easy joke to throw. I don't remember feeling like I had less belonging when those jokes were made, because I had friendships and because I had these other affirming experiences from teachers and from the school, and whether it was student life organization or doing this thing or the other thing, and having moments where my humanity and my dignity were being affirmed. I had a healthy diet. I would hope every teenager gets a healthy diet of getting their ass kicked and getting some encouragement. Or in the sense that the world is full of wanton, unjust violence, and you just happen to be the subject of one of the things that's funny and out of your control. I actually remember there was this film of this white girl growing up in Brooklyn, and she becomes a hip-hop dancer, and she dates this black guy. I remember one of our classmates being like, oh, that reminds me so much of you and your girlfriend. Why? I don't dance. It's only because that's a black person and she's a pale girl. It's a thing that people can bring up to have a conversation. I don't remember, maybe I blocked it out. I don't remember being really made to feel less than, or when someone was trying to make me feel less than and they actually believed they were better than me. I felt the evidence didn't bear out their view of the universe and didn't feel any responsibility to disabuse them of their poorly held notions. If you actually think you're better than me, then sorry for you, dude.
Yeah.
Good luck. Have a good life. But I don't see any evidence of that.
Yeah. I think that's where racism stings and is a problem. People use it as a tool to put that notion that you are the other and I must be better than you. Right? And whatever entitlement comes from that. I guess the anti-racism movement is also trying to curb that.
Yeah.
But then a whole set of issues comes from just generating guilt and shame around being woke and looking at every joke and word as a curated thing to say.
Yeah.
So that's why I like going back to intentions rather than words and trying to unpack a little bit of these intentions, because anything hurtful that you say, whether it's against a gay person or a black person or a woman, they usually tend to, at some level, make us feel better about ourselves. And as kids, we were doing that all the time, but it's because we were learning what it means to have sensitivities and what it means to be sociable to begin with, what it means to talk to someone.
Yeah.
But it wasn't held, I think, at its core by the intention of I'm white and you are black. We're going to use these words to ensure that you know your place in the universe, because at the end of the day, we regarded our inner circle as safe, or at least the safest place. And so it felt almost like we can explore some of these jokes. Even when you say some of these jokes, I still laugh. I still think there's something comedic about it. The fact that we're such assholes. Hilarious how we would say something like that. It's really hard to have that raw conversation between people, let's say in America or in South Africa.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because we're making jokes about you being black, but we're not white either.
Yeah.
And that became very evident later when I moved to the States. And I realized, like, oh, I'm actually brown. That's my identity in that context. And maybe that's what softens you over time, is that you realize that whatever words that you didn't understand back then have their weight. And it's part of growing up. It's part of introspection.
Yeah, a couple of things I'm reacting to in what you said. I think it's important to say that my experience or our experience overall is like a really privileged one, right? I didn't feel unsafe. I wasn't excluded from opportunities. And that didn't come from a heritage and a descendancy of being subjected to violence because of my skin color. In fact, my ancestors probably perpetrated violence because of their skin color, right? And my experience of whether they're aggressions or microaggressions, whatever you're going to call them, is much softened and attenuated compared to someone who's in South Africa or the United States or many, if not most places in the world, where their lineage and their personal experience and their family experience and their daily experience is much more violent, right? It's easy for me to say, oh, it didn't hurt that bad. Right? Yeah, because I wasn't being hurt compared to a lot of other people. But I also think it's important to like what you just said, they are just words, but words have power, and words can do harm, and words make the world, and words make the inner world, or whatever it is. One thing you mentioned that was interesting around this belonging point, I also wonder to what extent within the friend group, we all realized or felt that we didn't really belong big picture the place that we were in, right? We were in this subculture. We felt misunderstood or underappreciated by our parents, by Muslim culture, and by the city that we're in, and other people around us who are our age to some extent, right? We consumed different things. We had different aspirations. Most of us had some desire, if not a very strong one, to leave when we had the opportunity. I had this anticipated privilege of I won't have to make my life here. So even if I have a doubt in the back of my mind of many of my friends' parents will allow me to marry their daughter, I'm not sure. I'm not that worried about it because probably I can seek greener pastures, which has probably come back to bite me in the ass.
Huh.
Yeah.
Huh.
Just like non-committal.
Because the grass is always going to be greener.
Maybe. I'm just having that realization right now. Oh, maybe I was just waiting. I was enjoying high school, but I was also expecting to leave.
So after Egypt, I remember you giving us the graduation speech because the school wanted to honor you as being the one who got to Harvard and parade you in front of the parents, hoping for their other kids to join the school that takes people into Harvard. At that point, I feel we should bring into the story that speech of yours.
It's a peak Hatim moment. Thank you for giving me the chance to talk about it.
Please.
I think that moment has come back in other threads of my life since then, and I'm just seeing the thread right now.
So let's paint the picture first. It's graduation.
Cool. Graduation, we're in the school auditorium. We're about 40 students who are graduating. I don't know if you remember this, with myself and Yasmin Biali, one of our super clever classmates. The previous year, we had been leaders of the Student Life Organization because they decided that the students in the class ahead of us were all clowns and they shouldn't give them that responsibility. We had given the previous year's graduation speech together. And then this year, we were supposed to do the same thing again. But then I resigned dramatically for some really garbage reason a few weeks before graduation. I think mainly because I wanted to have the dramatic experience of submitting a letter of resignation, which is great. And they still let me give a talk or say something about what you just said. I think they wanted to be able to introduce the kid who's going to go to Ivy League school or whatever. I had to give them my speech beforehand to review it, and I gave it to them. But then we're all teenagers. We've been going to this school that's very academically oriented, very focused on exams, had strict rules. We felt like had strict rules. It wasn't that strict in retrospect. And so there was this sentiment of rebellion that you want to express. And when I got to the stage, I had written an additional page that I took out of my pocket and unfolded and read the additional page, which was a critique of the school. Yeah, and I felt really proud to think that I was speaking truth to power. I'd been given this podium and I would say things and then the other 40 students on stage would be like, yeah, so true, we're oppressed. But I'm sure if I went back and read it, it would just be like vague complaints about homework. Dr. Giddings, the school director or principal, found me in the courtyard where we were celebrating, and I probably went to him and I was like, hey, I'm sure that was a bit awkward. And he was like, you said it all. And he shook my hand and he walked away. And I never understood what that meant. But I remember it sometimes when I'm dealing with teenagers who are being rebellious as they should be in my current job. I wonder if I'm feeling what he was feeling.
What is that feeling like?
There's doubt. There's a lot of doubt, especially when you make a hard decision about a student that you're going to expel. Sometimes you have to make those decisions, but you can never be 100% sure that it's right. Sometimes the right choice is still harmful. I think anyone in this kind of job, and a lot of people, I think in education generally, you accrue these moral wounds. And I think I worry about whether they're hardening me and making me someone that I wouldn't be proud of if my younger self met them.
How do you help someone that's in their high school years, late teen years, maybe going into their 20s, that's thinking of these things, that's exploring what it means for them to express their identity, belong to a certain group of people, and generally have more conversations that helps them unpack these demons, like you said? What is something that you would tell these kids that we can send them in this time capsule that we're creating here to tell them how these demons can be faced? Like, what is it? What does that entail?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm having this experience, I guess probably experience that most of us have, where the more life you live, the more experiences you have, the less confident you are in the advice that you can give. The things I end up saying to students are mostly pretty hokey and cheesy, but I'm my best shot at the time. One thing that everyone should do, as far as I'm concerned, as much as they can, because it has only upside, is read. I think it's a way to build a relationship with yourself in a way that watching stuff passively just doesn't do. But I also think it's a way to build compassion. And I think there's research that backs that up, that particularly reading fiction heightens our emotional intelligence and builds compassion. So
I need to look that up for my marketing.
you probably should, yeah, definitely. This book increases compassion by 12%. 3 out of 5.
We could all be evidence-based. Be able to sell this book in no time. 20% compassion, plus 10% empathy.
3 out of 5 former prison guards gave up drinking after reading this book. So yeah, I read. You're going to receive a lot of stuff, and you have to take some agency in the way that you make it meaningful in your life. So like my relationship with blackness is my relationship with blackness, and I can ignore it, I can pretend, or I can just excavate it and see how can it adorn my existence in a way that sometimes is heavy, sometimes is light, but that I'm not afraid of. And I think the last thing is just be kindly suspicious, first of yourself, but also of others. When you see people really confident, but especially when you feel confident, kindness is good, and you should practice it. I haven't found more elegant ways to say that.
I agree. Yeah. And I don't think we need to back that one with research. Just be fucking kind, guys.
Exactly.
The world is a nicer place.
Exactly.
Hatim, thanks for, first of all, being here, and thanks for this wonderful Lamu adventure.
Thank you for making it happen, man.
Thanks for taking the time during your holidays to entertain my whims and record this podcast and talk about some of the tough stuff. And thanks for your friendship, man, especially in this trip, like being able to find a comfort in an old friend in a new place is quite invaluable. Very grateful for your friendship.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you as well for making Lamu happen. I probably wouldn't have ended up here otherwise. Thanks for this conversation, which definitely is therapeutic. So even if the sound turns out terrible and you can't publish it, I've gotten what I need out of this. Thank you for your friendship, but also thank you for this project that you're undertaking. It's really inspiring to see. This stuff is super complicated, and there's not many voices. There's infinite voices, but there's not many voices that I can relate to on the same level. And it's very cool to see someone work through identity and masculinity and power and hate and how to live life in a way that you can feel at least comfortable with, if not eventually proud of. Putting your stuff out there and having the messy, creative process out in public. It's genuinely inspiring and uplifting, and I'm sure really hard and scary and tough. I appreciate you and I appreciate the work, and I look forward to seeing more of it.
Well, without you listening and all that support, it's not as fun. So thanks again for entertaining all of that, man. And as the kid with the highest composition score, so it means a lot coming from you, man.
Habibi.
Thank you so much for listening this far. I would really love to hear from you which parts of this story or stories that we've shared resonated with you. What did you think of the conversation, and what stories do you have to share with us about race and identity and our collective struggle with it? You can engage with this project and share your thoughts on findgumption.com. That's F-I-N-D, Gumption, Gumption.com. You can comment and send me emails and get updates on everything from the newsletter to poetry and updates about the novel. But also, you'll get notified about episode 16, which is about heartbreak And one of the big changes that I went through last year was a divorce. And this episode is with Shireen, my ex-wife, who was also featured on episode number 5. And this time, it's about the changes that we go through while experiencing heartbreak. And we shall be reflecting on our own heartbreak, in our own relationship breaking down, and processing it in real time, as crazy as that sounds, on the next episode. So stay tuned, subscribe on the channel if you haven't, and I'll see you next time. Special thanks go out to Mustafa Al-Aizabi, who is producing this Gumcast to make it sound crisp and clear for your auditory pleasure.